So I jump up on that bridge table just to get some height. Trophy presentation is great. Then they go to commercial again, and when they come back, they're going to want to interview Jordan. So they come back from commercial, and there's like pandemonium, but somebody's screaming, "Where's Michael? Where's Michael? We need him on the stage." Blah, blah, blah. And instinctively, I don't know, something told me, look to your left. So I just did a 90-degree turn, and there he was right below me in the locker. It wasn't even his locker, holding the trophy with his dad next to him. I had an unobstructed view for maybe 5 seconds before they grabbed him, and I banged off 2 quick shots, and then somebody pulled him up on the stage.
Oh, wow.
Then you are in Australia right now.
You're talking NBA basketball. You're talking great teams. You're talking great individual players.
Takes it off, and there's number 23, and of course Johnny goes nuts.
So I'll get goosebumps thinking about it now.
I just tried to go out there and play my game.
I have no idea what you're talking about, Adam. I don't like anybody. I'm not a people person.
Strand, you made the pass. Yes. Christian, can you catch the ball? Yes.
All the stars were aligned and all the muscles fired at the right time, and I was able to get off the ground and throw one down.
I was saving that as a surprise for you.
And now, introducing your host for In All Airness, Adam Ryan.
Welcome to episode 77. Thanks for joining me. Today, I'm excited to welcome Andrew Bernstein to the show. 2017 marks the 35th consecutive NBA Finals that Andy will cover, an amazing accomplishment that dates back to 1983. We chat about the origins of Andy's love for photography, how dramatic advances in technology have affected the industry, his crucial role in the creation of NBA photos in 1986, and plenty more. Rest assured, we also talk about a few of Andy's most iconic photos and how they came to be. We recorded this conversation on February 11, 2017. Andy was in an Oklahoma City hotel in the hours preceding the visiting Golden State Warriors match up against the OKC Thunder. If you enjoy this chat, and I'm confident you will, I highly recommend you listen to episode 34 of the show, where my guest was NBA photographer Steve Lepovsky, who covered the Boston Celtics for 23 years. Towards the end of the episode, I'll share another great podcast review. You can add yours by visiting inallairness.com/review. Show notes for this episode, including links to numerous topics covered, are at inallairness.com/77. Now, on to the show. My guest today has captured some of the most iconic NBA moments of all time. In 1986, he was named as the NBA's first official photographer. He was senior director of NBA photos for 25 years, and now, amongst other things, is director of photography at Staples Center. Andy Bernstein, thanks for joining me.
Hey, great to be here, man. Thanks for having me, Adam.
It's an honor to have a chance to speak with you today, especially on a game day.
Thank you.
Just before we actually do chat all things NBA, what actually led to your initial interest in photography?
Ooh, that goes back a ways, man. I hope I can remember that far back. When I was 14, my dad and I were going to make a trip out to the western United States, to go to all the major national parks and monuments, Yellowstone and Yosemite and Grand Canyon and all those. And I was taking a kind of a interest in photography at that point in high school, but nothing concrete. But he kind of took up on that and bought me a little camera, a little Canon TL camera. And we made our venture out west, and, I really took to it. And it was a great bonding experience with my dad. And I came back from that trip. My pictures were a lot better than his, and he begrudgingly admitted that. And then one thing led to the other in high school, and I had a very good friend who took me into his darkroom and showed me all the darkroom techniques when I was probably in maybe 10th or 11th grade. I went to a very big high school in Brooklyn, New York. We had a monthly newspaper, which I gravitated towards and became the photo editor of, as well as the yearbook. And, that kind of mushroomed from there, and ended up going to the University of Massachusetts, working for our daily newspaper, very prestigious college paper, and figured out kind of soon once I got there that I wasn't getting enough technical training in photography. They really didn't have any classes in photography there other than the newspaper. So packed my bags and moved out to California, went to Art Center College of Design, which is a hardcore commercial advertising school, probably the best in the country for that. But I wanted to be a photojournalist, a sports photographer, and was very persistent. Hooked up with some Sports Illustrated photographers as an assistant while I was in school, and they kind of helped open some doors for me. And like you said, in 1986, I helped to start NBA Photos. I became the first official NBA photographer. Prior to that, 83 was my first gig with the NBA, which was the NBA All-Star Weekend. Well, it was actually just a game in those days, in 1983 at the Forum in L.A.
Right.
Became the Dodgers team photographer in 84, so it's been a good run.
It's been a fantastic run. That's great to hear the background there. Thanks for going into a bit of detail there.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up as well, were you a big-time sports fan? Because you obviously said that you were looking at getting into sports photography particularly. So what sort of sports were you following growing up?
Well, I grew up in the streets of Brooklyn, and we played a lot of sports, stickball, street hockey. We played tackle football on concrete in the winter, and I was always the smallest guy on the block and the smallest guy in the playground. And although I loved sports, and it was really my kind of my only time that I really spent one-on-one with my dad is when we went to New York Ranger hockey games, which we did religiously my entire life growing up, and occasionally New York Mets games. I knew I wasn't going to be, a competitive athlete. I would never get a scholarship or anything like that. That was way too far to even reach for. But I wanted to be in sports somehow or the other. That just kind of fueled my fire once I got up to the University of Massachusetts, because we had a Division 1A, Division 1 competitive school. So I was able to shoot college basketball, college football, on that level. Was able to merge my love for sports with my new love for photography. It seemed like a natural fit.
Oh, that's great. Now, you did mention there the 1983 NBA All-Star Game at the Great Western Forum, and one of the greatest all-time national anthems pre-game by Marvin Gaye.
Yeah.
Just incredible. I actually just watched it last night, just doing a bit of research and checking out some clips online, and the crowd were just so enchanted by his performance. Do you remember much about his singing of the anthem there, and also how involved were you in terms of taking photos there for the NBA? Were you the main person there doing the photo work?
Well, you got to understand a little bit of the backstory here, Adam. I kind of had my foot in the door there at the Forum, and the Lakers and the LA Kings, the hockey team, played there, and everyone worked for California Sports Company, which was owned at the time by Dr. Buss. One of my friends said to me early in the 82-83 season, he said, we're having the All-Star game here in February, and as far as I know, they don't really have a photographer. There's no league photographer or anything. Would you be interested? And I said, of course. He said, well, go see so-and-so back in New York in the NBA office, and, maybe they'll throw you a gig or something and let you shoot. So I did that. I took my little portfolio back to New York. I met with a really nice guy named Porter McKinnon. Porter published the only publication that the NBA did at that time, which was a publication called NBA Today. It was kind of a oversized newsprint color publication. I think it came out probably once a month, maybe once a week, I'm not sure. But he looked at me and he said, so you live in LA, right? I said, yeah. He said, and so it won't cost us anything for you to come? I said, no. He said, well, then you got the gig, because we don't have anybody. Next thing I know, I'm there at the Forum, and I'm standing on the court during the national anthem. Marvin Gaye gets introduced, and he goes into this rendition of the national anthem, which, like you said, is epic and iconic, and will live forever, in the annals of national anthems worldwide. This is my introduction to working with the NBA, is standing in the middle of the court with both teams kind of in awe of what's going on. And if you see the video, about halfway through, the guys start getting into it, and they're looking over their shoulders, or they start, kind of swaying to Marvin's sound. And I just got into it too. I'm like, wow, I better just enjoy this, because I felt like this was really, really, really special. And the crowd, of course, got into it. The rest of that backstory is that the game was at noon. He walked onto the floor at about 11:55, without rehearsing, without testing a microphone, nothing. Just walked right out of the parking lot onto the floor. The guy I was working with at the Forum, my dear friend Lon Rosen, who happens to be now the head of everything for the Dodgers and Magic Johnson's longtime agent. Lon was in charge of that part of the game presentation, and needless to say, he was sweating bullets when there was no Marvin. I don't think Lon even had a backup plan. You know, what happened if Marvin didn't show up? Didn't show up, obviously, for rehearsal. It was a magical moment that was a great initiation to my 35 plus years working for the NBA.
Oh, that's fantastic to hear. Thanks for sharing some of the backstory there too. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
It was during the 1984 season that David Stern became NBA commissioner. You mentioned there how the NBA in the preceding year or two didn't have a whole lot in terms of photographers or whatnot. So from memory, how extensive or otherwise was the league's photo archives going back to the early to mid 1980s, and sort of how would that change with the introduction of NBA photos that you mentioned a little while ago?
Well, I think the archive consisted of probably one drawer of somebody's filing cabinet, if that.
Wow.
Probably most of that was old black and white prints or, clips that somebody had cut out. There was no one in charge of photos. It was the league at that time didn't really see the need for that, I don't think, other than maybe some historical archiving, but there might have been I might be exaggerating, 4 licensees that used photos. I remember there was 1 or 2 trading cards at the time, and there was a poster company. The league itself didn't produce anything that had photography on it. There was a magazine called Hoop Magazine, which was sort of the league program. If you go to a game in Chicago or LA or Boston, whatever, you get the same program, but it would have an insert for your particular game that you're watching in that city. So I think the league didn't even publish that. That was published by an outside entity. So when I came in, and it was the start of the whole Bird Magic era, and David Stern's vision to, coincided with trying to elevate the NBA from a league that, was kind of fourth rate at that point to being watched on national TV in real time. Our playoff finals games were time delayed when I started. And, negotiating big contracts with TV, and then, of course, with licensees, and Bird and Magic fueling that with their whole Converse connection. And then those licensees, like Converse, needed photos. So they would go to the league first, and then the league, being my good friend Terry Lyons, call me and say, hey, what do you got on Bird? What do you got on Magic? What do you got on Dominique? What do you got on, And so I think this is even before FedEx, that I would have to somehow get the pictures to him by, Pony Express. And I really honestly don't remember how we did it, but it was before FedEx. It might have been, U.S. mail or something. And, he would use it for whatever entity had contacted him. But by 86, it had gotten too big. Terry and I really couldn't handle it ourselves. There were already a nice handful of licensees had come on board. There were magazines that were being published devoted solely to NBA basketball. There were national publications like Sport Magazine, Inside Sports, Basketball Digest, that really needed, a constant flow of photos. So Terry and I wrote up a proposal, and we proposed it to Gary Bettman, who was the deputy commissioner under David at the time. Gary's now, been the commissioner of the NHL for a long, long time. And Gary really liked it, and David approved it, and we became an entity of the NBA. It was run out of the NBA office by some lawyers who didn't really know much about photography and creativity, and we ended up migrating over to a brand new entity of the NBA called NBA Entertainment, which started off in the city, but then moved out to Secaucus, New Jersey, to its own building with studios and offices. And that's where we've been ever since, based out of NBA Entertainment, and we're run by NBA Entertainment.
Okay, well, it makes perfect sense now when you say it, but I actually hadn't twigged that it would have become part of NBA Entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
because I'm well familiar with their VHS like have releases back in the day.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's very interesting to hear the backstory there. So great behind the scenes there. Thanks so much.
Mm-hmm.
How would you describe the technology of the cameras that you were operating back in the 1980s? Of course, everything these days in 2017, it's pretty much all digital, I'd assume, that you'd be using. But
Yeah.
what sort of gear did you have back then, and what was involved in a normal game day for you?
Well, have you ever seen an American cartoon series called The Flintstones?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so that's what it was like back in the early 80s. It was like I was living in bedrock, with the hammer and chisel. It was different. It was all manual cameras. No such thing as autofocus cameras in those days. We were using film, which is a forgotten four-letter word, I haven't shot film in a long, long time. But that's all we knew. What kind of gave me a leg up, I think, business-wise, was that through my assisting at Sports Illustrated, I had learned a very specialized technique of lighting indoor arenas with gigantic strobes, big flashes, that we would put in for the photographers. It would take, 3 or 4 hours to hump these giant strobe units up to catwalks all over the country. And basically, they're just giant strobe flashes that the photographer plugs into down on the floor, and when they push their trigger button, instead of the light of the arena being what is exposed on the film, it's actually a big flash picture. If you imagine, the little flash that you would put on top of your SLR now, it's probably about 200 or 300 times the power of that.
Wow.
Which for that instant that you're taking the photo, it just knocks out whatever the available or existing light is, and you're actually taking a flash picture. So that was a very, very specialized technique that only a few people in the country knew, and Sports Illustrated was the only entity that was doing it. So I learned that. That got me into getting my foot in the door with the people at the forum, because I was able to give them a strobe-lit photography that looked better, when it just was different. It was a higher quality than what they were getting from, just available light. And with the NBA as well, I was able to show them that, hey, you know what, if you can get me credentials to get into a game in Phoenix or Utah, Portland or wherever, I'll take my strobes up there and I'll do all the work myself, and you'll end up with this really nicely lit, photography. And I was very motivated, and I had a lot of ambition in those days, and crazy amount of energy too, because I couldn't do that obviously today. So fast forward, to the digital era, and that came in slowly. It took a lot of R&D for the camera companies to figure out how to replace film cameras. There was always, like, for example, a huge delay when you'd push the shutter button on the early digital cameras. There'd be quarter of a second, a half a second delay before it actually took the picture. So, in action sports photography, that's an eternity. I mean, obviously I've missed everything by that point.
Yeah.
So it was a matter of either anticipating the action and being somewhat clairvoyant, or them kind of figuring it out, which they did. They figured it out, and it took a while. And I was one of the last guys, honestly, to go kicking and screaming into the digital era. I really didn't want to give up film. I loved everything about film, the tactile, the fact that you could hold on to a piece of film, that you could actually hold your image in your hand, or look at it on a light box or whatever. At that point, I was shooting 2.25 film as well as 35 millimeter, which was, an amazing step up in the quality of what you could get from that. But it became the way things had to be. And the advent of autofocus, auto everything cameras has helped. Some friends and I were talking about over dinner the other night that we can't believe that we shot action sports, football, baseball, basketball, hockey, whatever, track and field, horse racing, no matter what it is, with manually focused cameras. I mean, I honestly could not do that today. I've so adjusted to the autofocus. But that was, true to me, true photography. That was the true art of creating, composing, focusing, exposing. You had to be very, very aware of your exposure at all times, the type of film you were using. These days you don't have to worry about any of that, unfortunately, for the people who are getting into it today. And I teach photography on the college level back at Art Center where I went to school, and none of the students that I teach have ever shot, one frame of film, and have never used a camera other than an autofocus digital camera. So it is kind of like going back to the prehistoric ages, It's actually very gratifying when I see some of my old images that I know were shot on film and I know were shot manually and pre-digital, and it actually means a little bit more to me when I see those images, to be honest with you.
Oh, I can definitely understand that, and I love the Flintstones reference. We do get that over here in Australia as well, but some funny stuff with Fred and Barney.
Right.
Just fascinating to hear how the technology has changed over the years, and you're doing all the, as you're talking about with the manual focusing and all the other things, you're doing that in real time in a sporting arena with, tens of thousands of people in some instances as well. So I guess the pressure at the time and wanting to make sure you get the right shot and hope that you get the right shot. I suppose you have to wait till the film was developed, I guess, as to what kind of shots you got.
Yeah, sure. I mean, in the old film days, my normal workflow was I'd shoot the game. We would put the film in different envelopes depending on the type of film it was and how it was shot and how the lab had to process it. And there was a lab that was on my way home from the forum or wherever I was coming from on the road, and I would drop the film in the night drop and then show up in the morning about 9:30, and there would be these long rolls of film or, boxes of slides, and I would go through that and edit my handy, loop in my eye and then package it all together and ship it back to the NBA.
Wow.
Or, if it was something I was doing away from the NBA, it would end up having to be put in slide pages, and those slide pages would then be put into a filing cabinet in my house or my office. These days, it's gone beyond instant gratification. I mean, it's I can shoot a picture and immediately, obviously, push the preview button, and I'll see exactly what I got. During games, I'm actually tethered in with an Ethernet line that's in the back of my camera, that as I shoot, my photos are being sent directly to an editor in New Jersey.
Oh.
Whatever arena I'm shooting in, there's a super high-speed line that goes directly to this editor's computer, and he's seeing what I'm shooting, as well as my own editor, who is on site. So tonight, my guy will be in the back of the arena, in the press room, seeing what I'm shooting, making sure everything's working. But the editor in New Jersey is getting it in real time and selecting the photos, captioning them quickly, and then sending them off to Getty, who posts them. So within 5 minutes, basically, of clock time, I probably have 10 or 12 photos already up on Getty.
Oh.
So it's as close to live coverage for still photography as you could possibly get.
That's just amazing to hear this behind-the-scenes sort of stuff that's happening, and the technology, the advances these days that can allow that sort of stuff to happen. It's really very interesting to hear, and I appreciate you talking about that.
Mm-hmm.
What I was going to ask was, you were taking photos there for the Lakers during the Showtime era.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to ask you about a few of the great photos you've taken over the years, if you don't mind, in a little while.
Sure.
Just in relation to sitting at the Great Western Forum and being a big-time sports fan as you were, was it hard to sort of separate yourself from the incredible era that you were being a part of and actually doing your job at the same time? How did that sort of work, and what sort of memories do you have from those first couple of seasons?
Well, I learned really early on that if I was going to make a career out of this, Adam, I couldn't be a fan at the same time.
Right.
So I would wait to be a fan till I got back to my hotel room or I got home or the drive home or whatever. But once I got into the building, I had to do my job. I mean, I always say that if I take my eye out of the camera for an instant and watch what's going on the court, I'm not doing my job. I'm missing the photo.
Yeah.
So I've been in that situation a million times, game-winning shot, celebration after a championship. I've been to 34 championships, so, I've had to run on the court after every single one. If I'm going to stand there and, revel in it, then somebody else is getting the picture I should be getting.
That's true.
But it kind of sunk in, especially being in L.A. and being part of that entire Showtime experience. having close relationships with people like, Magic and James Worthy and Pat Riley and just the whole aura of being in that presence of this amazing period of time. But I never really honestly got caught up in it. I was thankful that I was in the right place at the right time, to be honest with you. But I felt like I had earned that as well, that I had worked really hard and had taken advantage of the opportunities and the relationships, really kind of honed my skills and paid my dues, as an assistant was a tough kind of way up, honestly. So I also felt very protective, I guess, of where I was and that I didn't want to screw it up, because there are a lot of guys behind me that would have loved to have been in my position. So Pat Riley used to say sometimes that fear is the greatest motivator. So I kind of lived by that a little bit. I never wanted to risk losing what I had worked so hard to attain by, either being a fan or getting out of my zone of work or taking things for granted, which a lot of people do, unfortunately. Never took it for granted. I was always very grateful and very appreciative of everybody who helped me along the way.
Oh, that's really good to hear. Just contrasting the Showtime Lakers, the San Diego Clippers relocated to LA, I think just before the 84-85 season.
Right.
I assume that you then would cover also the Clippers games as well when it wasn't a Lakers game, or obviously when they played each other. But how was that contrast between the Showtime Lakers and then the, down on their luck Clippers franchise that was obviously struggling for relevance in the LA market?
Well, I was fortunate that I then had two teams in my market, which was phenomenal. And I was working for the LA Kings at that time, too.
Okay.
Hockey and the Dodgers. So,
You were keeping very busy.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. But it was a big contrast. I always had a very soft spot in my heart for the Clippers. Really, really good people, first of all, that worked for them. And, they were sort of the underdog from the moment they moved to L.A. I just decided, I wasn't going to get caught up in all that, like Laker-Clipper sort of comparisons.
Mm-hmm.
Clippers were trying to, get their own identity, get their own fan base. But it was quite a different vibe, obviously, when you'd go into the sports arena for just any kind of regular season Clippers home game as compared to walking into the Forum. It was basically night and day. But the Clipper people were persistent and relentless, and they sought out a fan base which stayed with them for a long, long time. And now, fast forward to now, and obviously the tables have turned right now between the two franchises. But it's no secret that the Clippers commanded a huge price tag when they were sold, and I think that's testament to the people who really worked hard to get them to that point. Establish their own fan base, their own identity. They're playing in the same building, playing inside Staples Center for 17 years in the same building. But they've managed to do it, and my hat's off to them, honestly. I think it's great, and I think both teams can coexist wonderfully, and they have for a long, long time.
True. I'd just love to ask you about some of your photos now, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
Great. There's a great photo that you took of Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. They're standing either side of the NBA championship trophy, laughing at one another.
Yeah, sure.
Can you remember the shoot and whether they were reacting to something you were saying or something else altogether?
Well, this is a great story. I'm glad you asked me about it. There's a big backstory that has a few different tentacles to it. But in those days, as now, but those days, the Lakers and Celtics would only play each other once in each building.
Mm-hmm.
And once the rivalry got established, everyone who, I guess, worked in both cities couldn't wait until that schedule came out in August. And that would be the first game you'd circle on the schedule. Like, when were the Celtics coming in,
Yeah.
It was always a CBS afternoon game on a Sunday, usually a noon game. A lot of hype leading into it. The story of that photo was that in '84, Lakers and Celtics played each other in the finals. Celtics beat the Lakers. You probably remember from the research that the Lakers should have won that series. It ended poorly for Magic. He had to live with that for the whole summer. There's this huge buildup for the following year. And we weren't going to see them until February in LA. So, half the season has gone by already. There was a magazine called Inside Sports at the time that wanted to do their NBA Finals preview cover, which wasn't going to run until May, I guess, their May issue. They wanted it to be Magic and Bird, like a portrait setting. And they said, well, look, you think you can make that happen, like get them together when the Celtics come to LA, So, and set up a portrait setup and blah, blah, blah. They had no concept whatsoever. They just asked me if I could do it. So I talked to both PR guys who were friends of mine, and we hatched a plan that we would, in the Forum, right outside the visitors' locker room, there was a tiny, tiny little spare locker room that I could set up a backdrop in. And keep in mind, this is a noon game on a Sunday, nationally televised, right?
Yeah.
So the idea was that somehow each PR guy would get their guy to come into that room at some point before they ran on the court for the game.
Yeah.
I mean, that would never in a gazillion years happen today. I mean, it's like you couldn't even do that on an off day, in the summer, if you took the guys to Cancun and pay, all expenses paid. I mean, it's just like no chance.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So this is game day. Anyway, whatever. My idea was, okay, I got this great idea where I'm going to put the trophy on a pedestal, like a Greek pedestal. And my idea was, all the famous boxing posters where you have the two guys like looking at each other in the eye like they're going to kill each other.
Yeah, yeah.
Like staring each other down, right? So that was my idea. So I get them in there. They both come in miraculously, right? They're in uniform. They don't look at each other, talk to each other. I say, okay, guys, we got 30 seconds literally to do this. I'm all set up. Magic, I want you on this side. Larry, I want you on that side. And then I want you guys, like two great fighters, just to stare each other down. Okay, you guys ready? And I said, okay. So you go into it, and like in a second, they just cracked up. And I don't know why I pushed the shutter button, but I did. I pushed it. And that was the picture that resulted. I took one more frame, and then they were out. That was it. Done.
Oh.
And as they're leaving, I said, "What happened?" They said, "We just couldn't do it. We can't do that." They thought it was hilarious to them. So it was just a great moment, and I think it produced one of the really memorable photos probably in my career. I mean, I just love that picture.
Oh, that is so good to hear. Thanks so much for elaborating on that one. I already loved the photo, but now hearing the backstory behind it, it just makes me think even more fondly of it.
Yeah.
You're also responsible for one of my favourite photos of all time, and I'm sure many of my listeners as well will be familiar with this instantly. It took place during a pre-season game at Springfield Civic Centre in November of 87.
Mm-hmm.
It was the Hall of Fame game between the Bulls and the Lakers.
Right.
The photo that I'm talking about became the front cover for the iconic NBA entertainment release Come Fly With Me. I just absolutely love to know how that photo came to be, what sort of technology you employed to get that shot, because it's probably one of the most iconic and outstanding shots of looking through the backboard as Jordan's about to throw down a huge dunk.
Well, Adam, first I got to applaud you for coming up with the catalyst for some of my favorite stories, because through my favorite pictures.
Glad to hear it.
It was a meaningless game. It was a preseason game. In those days, the Hall of Fame would host the Hall of Fame game, which was like an obligatory game that I guess the NBA felt they had to do for the Hall of Fame, where the previous, well, I don't know if it was the previous NBA champion, but they would get two NBA teams to play, and this sort of it kicked off the season, so to speak, in October, So tiny little Springfield Civic Center, which coincidentally was down the street basically for where I went to college in Amherst, Massachusetts. So that was kind of a cool thing.
Okay.
So I go in there. This is obviously pre-digital, pre-everything. And in those days, when we do these remote cameras, which is that particular camera is called a remote because it's clamped, to the back of the backboard, we can only do one remote at that time. In addition to the cameras that you're shooting with, you can only do one remote because there was no way in those days to synchronize multiple cameras together to all fire at the same time with the strobes going off at the same time. That technology didn't come on board until probably, at least another 10, 12 years.
Wow.
And that's the technology we use now, and that I helped to develop. But I chose for my one remote camera, and being that it was Jordan, and that he was liked to dunk, I chose to do the remote through the glass, is what we call it, through the glass remote. And the remote is always on the opposite side to where you sit. So I'm on the other end of the court. So he comes in for that dunk, and I hit the button. I have a little trigger button attached to my camera, and I hoped that I shot it at the right time. They didn't have any replay screen there. They didn't even have a screen. I mean, it was just a scoreboard. So I had no idea if I had shot the picture or not, if I gotten it or not, or, if it actually came out, because sometimes you would shoot it and the strobes wouldn't go off and they wouldn't synchronize with the camera, whatever the hell it was. The game ends, and my friend Terry Lyons comes running up to me and goes, "Did you get that? Did you get that?" I said, "I don't know. I mean, maybe I got it. I don't know." He says, "Well, let's go find out." So I said, "But Terry, there's no lab here. Springfield's in the middle of nowhere." He goes, No, we're driving to New York. Pack up your stuff. Get in the car. We're driving to New York City." So that's what we did. We got in the car, and it's like 11:30 at night, and this is the God's honest truth. We drive to this lab in Lower Manhattan. It's probably at that point about 3 o'clock in the morning, and they have a night drop, and I put my film in there, but the film had to be tested, and what that means is that I wasn't sure on the exposure and how the lab should process the film. So they had to do a test of the film, which means that they have to cut off the beginning of the film that has 1 or 2 frames on it. They run that, hold the rest of the roll, right? And then you evaluate what that test looks like, and then they run the final, rest of the roll. So I had to do a test because I didn't trust that I would hit it on the head. Luckily, I did do the test. So the lab was, I guess the technician came in probably around 6. 7:30, we're like knocking on the door. Keep in mind this is New York City. They thought we were like some bums who were trying to like get some food or something.
Yeah.
And he said, no, we got film. We got to test this film. We got to see it. So they ran the test, and I think it was probably around an hour or so, hour and a half later, the guy lets us in. He must have thought we were maniacs. He let us in, and I'm like, "Where's the film?" And he goes, "It's in the dryer," right? So I run in there, and I see the test. I go, "Okay, this is how you got to do it." So now you got to run the rest of the film, which I asked them to rush, and it's an hour and a half process.
Yeah.
Can't rush that, but an hour and a half later, we do the same thing. We run in to the back, and the film is hanging there with all the rest of my film, and I'm looking through every single roll, and there's one roll of just that remote camera, and we go up and down, and we find that frame, and I look at Terry and said, "Yeah, I think I got it."
That's fantastic.
I mean, you tell that to students or people who don't really know what I'm talking about from that Flintstone era. That story, like, they can't believe it. I mean, it's just like, it's like my kids ask me, like, "Dad, what did you do, like, before cell phones?" And that's what they grew up with. They don't know anything different.
Yeah. I think that even makes the beauty of that photo even more outstanding. The fact that you weren't even sure really until the following morning, had the shot even came out, did you press the button at the right time?
Yeah.
And you even to have the remote camera at the opposite end to where you were, and Jordan happened to do that dunk going to that end of the floor, everything sort of worked in your favor for that to occur.
Oh, absolutely. Everything that could have gone wrong could have, Seriously, I mean, everything you just said could have happened. Plus, maybe I got it, but maybe his arm was in front of his face.
Yeah, true.
Or maybe, if you look at that picture, he's just in the frame. He's not dead center, like straight on. It's like sort of as you look at it, he's, to the right of the basket, left of the frame. So I was just lucky, Walter Yost, the great guru of sports photography, says that we have to rely on luck, but our experience helps drive the luck. And, something told me, look, put the camera over there, push the button when I was supposed to. It was all in the preparation. And that's a big part of, of what I pride myself on is preparation. And, I got lucky.
Yeah, well, it's an absolutely stunning photo, and all these years on, it's still right up there, probably amongst my favourite of all time. Another quick question about one of your other great photos, one of many photos. The Bulls won their first NBA championship in 1991 at the Great Western Forum, and you snapped another amazing photo post-game in the Bulls locker room. You've got Jordan nestling his head or cradling against the Larry O'Brien trophy, and then his dad, James, is at Jordan's right, just near his shoulder.
Yeah.
If you don't mind just sharing the story of such a personal photo, how did that moment come to be?
Well, this is another great story. Like you said, the Bulls won it at the Forum. The visitors' locker room in the Forum was basically a glorified closet. Tiny, tiny, tiny room, low ceiling. And in those days, the TV network, NBC then, they would do the trophy presentation in the locker room.
Yeah, that's right.
They have this little teeny stage set up, like in the, corner of the locker room. And the place is just packed to the gills, right? So I follow the team off the court into the locker room, which is, what I'm supposed to do is my job. It's bedlam in there, but even by the time I get in there, it's throwing champagne around, the whole thing is going on. The network had gone to commercial, and they come back from commercial, and they're giving the trophy out. And so I had to figure out a vantage point. It was packed. So I saw there was like a little bridge table in the middle of the locker room, which they probably use, for tickets and snacks or whatever. So I jump up on that bridge table just to get some height. And I shoot that thing. The trophy presentation is great. Then they go to commercial again. And when they come back, they're going to want to interview Jordan after the commercial. So they come back from commercial, and there's like pandemonium, but somebody's screaming, "Where's Michael? Where's Michael? We need him on the stage." Blah, blah, blah. And with everything going on, and instinctively, I don't know, something told me, look to your left. So I just did a 90-degree turn, and there he was right below me in the locker. It wasn't even his locker, holding the trophy with his dad next to him. I had an unobstructed view for maybe 5 seconds before they grabbed him, and I banged off 2 quick shots, and then somebody pulled him up on the stage.
Oh, wow.
So fast forward to a few years later, when his father was murdered, and I know how close Michael was to his dad, just like I was to my dad. Michael and I actually, shared that sort of thing with our dads about sports, and Michael knew my dad, and it was just, anyway, I knew that photo was important to him, but I didn't know it was that important until I got a call from his office asking me to send a print because Michael had personally requested it to hang in his office or his house.
Oh.
That just, meant a lot to me. And to this day, it's just kind of, it's a very personal moment to me and to him. And it just, means a lot that I was able to shoot that.
That's a terrific story behind it. And yeah, thanks so much for sharing it. As I alluded to, it's obviously a very personal photo, and it came at a very sensitive moment, of course, and he's celebrating his first title. But that's a really terrific behind the scenes on that one. Thanks so much.
Yeah, of course.
My second to last question. As we speak, you're in Oklahoma City, and soon you'll be on your way to work the Thunder's home game against the visiting Golden State Warriors.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a set game day routine in the lead up to when the game actually takes place, Andy?
Oh, yeah, 100%. I have very set routine. Luckily, we've been here. This is a second game, which is kind of rare during the regular season that I'll be in the same city for 2 games in a row. But the schedule was really super attractive to me and my boss at the NBA when the Thunder, they played Cleveland on Thursday, and now they're playing the Warriors tonight. So, both NBA finalists back-to-back. And, it's a great place to work here, too. And, of course, the Westbrook factor and wanting to get a lot of stuff on him at home. What I'm trying to say is that my normal game day routine is not what I'm doing today. We did that on Thursday when we flew in Wednesday night, my assistant and I, and then Thursday we got to the arena at 1:00 and set up, 7 remote cameras and all the stuff we have to do. It's about 3.5 hours.
Wow.
But we were lucky that there was nothing in the arena yesterday, so we could keep all that stuff up.
Okay.
Yeah, so today we basically go back and sort of turn everything on, and kind of set up a couple of cameras that I shoot with on the court, but it's a much, much, much easier day today. But very anticipatory day because this is Durant's first trip back to Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
He and Russell had a long history here. We're all kind of wondering how that's going to kind of materialize on the court,
That's right.
I got to get over there early because Russell, he probably could even be there by now by the time I get there, 5 hours before game time. But, it's important for me to get these guys arriving as the beginning of the story. I like to tell the game as part of a story. They arrive, you got the whole pregame, the game itself, postgame. It's all part of the one story you're trying to tell. So, so we're going to go over there now, kind of get everything turned on and making sure it's all working, and then I'll just be waiting.
Yeah, well, it's been a fascinating time to chat with you today, and I thank you so much for making time for me on a game day. I won't hold you any longer, but I believe this year will also mark the 35th consecutive NBA Finals that you've covered. Is that correct?
Yes, that's frighteningly correct, Adam.
Oh, that's remarkable. So congratulations on an incredible tenure with the league.
Thank you.
I've just been fascinated by your photography over the years. It's been a pleasure to have a chance to chat with you, and I'd love to chat with you maybe at another time and go into a bit more detail about your book with Phil Jackson, Journey to the Ring.
Yes.
But I'll include links in the show notes to that great book. Black and white photography. It's really stunning photos.
Yes, thank you very much.
Oh, you're more than welcome.
Do you ever come over to the States?
That's a great question. I came over in 1994 on a tour of the NBA just with some die-hard Australian fans, and then went back in 1995 for about 2 weeks. Later this year, my wife and I are actually flying over towards mid-December through early New Year. Hope to be there for about 2 to 3 weeks in different places like LA, New York, San Francisco. So we will be over for the first time in a long time.
Oh, that's great. Well, obviously, you got to keep me posted, and we got to get together.
Oh, that'd be fantastic.
Just so you know, the NBA schedule for next season will come out probably first week or so of August.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you look at it, you could kind of structure your trip around that. That's been sort of the story of my life.
I can imagine.
But, you could see when the Warriors are home, if you're going to be up in the Bay Area, and then Lakers, Clippers. So you can kind of maximize your NBA experience while you're here. It'd be good to see you and meet you, man, in person.
I'd love that. That'd be fantastic, Andy. So I look forward to hopefully being able to connect with you, and all the best for later on today. And again, thanks so much for making time for me. And just one last quick thing. Your Instagram feed is a must follow if there ever was one. Is that the best way for listeners of the show to keep up with what you're doing, or just obviously aside from the NBA online properties?
Yeah, we're very, very active on Instagram. I post photos after every game, and it's at ADB Photo Inc. So it's A as in apple, D as in David, B as in boy, photo, PHOTOINC.
Beautiful. I'll include links in the show notes to this episode, but I can't thank you enough for making time for me today, and look forward to hopefully connecting with you again in the future, Andy.
Thank you so much, Adam. It's really fun going down memory lane with you, my friend.
I enjoyed it. Thanks again.
Take care, man. Thank you.
Good on you, Andy.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. I welcome your interaction with the show. Suggest topics or guests you want to hear conversations with. Leave a voicemail. Simply visit inallairness.com/voice. Click Start Recording. Leave a message and press Stop. You can even listen back before submitting. Press Send and you're done. Time to share another great review from a fan of the show. Thanks to Jay Anani on the Brazilian iTunes store. It's titled Best Source for MJ, and it reads, the best podcast to get information, stories, and reviews on MJ's career. Quality guests also make unmissable appearances. So thanks very much, Jay, for that. I really appreciate you taking time to leave a review. Worldwide, the show currently has 69 reviews, 66 on iTunes and 3 on Stitcher. Thanks again for your continued support. If you add a review, I'd love to read it out on a future episode. Your ratings and reviews are one of the best ways to support the podcast. If you enjoy the show, please do tell your basketball-loving friends about it. Word-of-mouth recommendations are truly worth their weight in gold. Stay up to date with my podcast and subscribe to my monthly email newsletter. You'll receive exclusive details on upcoming podcast episodes, future high-profile guests to appear on the show, and much more. simply visit inallairness.com/news. You can subscribe to my show in various ways. Apple Podcasts, visit inallairness.com/iTunes. Android, visit inallairness.com/Android. Add it to your Stitcher playlist, inallairness.com/Stitcher. You can also subscribe on Pocket Casts, Player FM, TuneIn Radio, other podcatchers, and of course via the podcast app on your iOS device of choice. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show and share my web address with your friends and colleagues, inallairness.com. Check out the podcast archive for plenty more episodes with high-profile guests. Follow me on Twitter at inallairness. Please add your like to the show's social hub, facebook.com/inallairness. Join me next time for another edition of the show.